This is Dan Scotti from Pizza Party Wrestling, and you're listening to the Pro Wrestling Post Podcast.
You're listening to the Pro Wrestling Post Podcast with your host, Mark Madison. This episode's guest is Dan Scotti. Visit ProWrestlingPost.com for interviews, blogs, and upcoming events in your area. You can also find the podcast on iTunes, Stitcher, Google Play, Anchor, or whatever podcast app you prefer. And now here's your host, Mark Madison.
Welcome, ladies and gentlemen, to the Pro Wrestling Post Podcast, and I'm joined by promoter extraordinaire, Mr. Dan Scotti. Thank you, Dan, from Pizza Party Wrestling. How are you?
I'm good. Thank you for the lovely introduction.
Not a problem. So maybe you could give fans that, independent wrestling fans that maybe aren't as privy to Pizza Party, where it initially originated from, some of its backstory, and pizza and wrestling, it seems like a perfect marriage.
Right. That's what I said. So we started Pizza Party Wrestling last year in New Jersey. That's where we mainly operate out of. It just sort of happened to be a perfect storm. We had a lot of connections that were going to be out here, and it was sort of lined up. People we knew, people we wanted to give a platform to, and so we knew that it was the perfect opportunity for us to start what we've had an idea for a while now, Pizza Party Wrestling. And the idea sort of came together. I've always thought that there was something for everybody in professional wrestling. A lot of people just don't know it. I think pro wrestling can be a little bit intimidating and a little bit misunderstood. So our thought process was take pizza to help, the most universally loved food, and take something like professional wrestling, which is not as universally loved, and combine them in hopes of exposing more individuals to professional wrestling.
So now its success has spawned on to a second year, but did you feel like there were some hurdles initially with getting the concept and the idea off the ground?
For sure. I think especially I don't have the same sort of intro to wrestling that everybody else does, at least on the professional landscape. I came from the backyard wrestling scene. I met a bunch of people, and when the scene sort of died down, we knew that the barrier to entry to professional wrestling was a little bit more challenging. I think it's gotten, I don't want to say easier, I think it's more accepting of people from different backgrounds. So that was definitely a hurdle, because there's no guidebook or handbook on how to succeed in professional wrestling. Obviously, there's training schools, but to go in blind with really no promotional background, just really a marketing background, and that was pretty much it. It was a tall order, but I would say we were definitely shocked when we launched. It was like in January of 2019 where we announced that we were doing something during WrestleMania week, and the response was incredible. From what I'm used to seeing in professional wrestling, that it takes quite a long time for anybody new to really earn any respect. But I think the pizza helped make people a little bit more open-minded about somebody new coming out of nowhere and running the show during Mania week.
You opened up a bit of a rabbit hole in the statement that you gave. If you're okay if I backtrack a little bit, you said that your background in wrestling isn't the same as everybody else's, and that you came from a more of a backyard wrestling type. So maybe give listeners a privy to some of your background as it pertains to exposure to initially wrestling and the transition to the professional side where you're running a business.
Sure. So I became a wrestling fan in the middle of the Ruthless Aggression era, and I did some here and there backyarding with friends, nothing really serious, nothing ever took off. I'd been a wrestling fan for years, but instead of going the traditional route and finding indie wrestling when I needed an alternative, I was very into backyard wrestling across YouTube, and there's names like Matt DeMorris that people might know, and there's names from the UK, and that was my independent wrestling. So I watched a ton of that, and it sounds very silly, but years later, I came to meet a lot of these people and started going to shows with these people and became really good friends with these people, and I was never really interested in a career in professional wrestling as a wrestler. My mindset was always geared more towards being a manager, but I think the older I got, the more I realized I kind of wanted to run my own show and see if I could make it doing that. So far, so good.
So now this is the second annual show. Between last year and this year, has it been a year of planning for you? Has there been a lot of preparation in between? Do you see maybe even moving forward? It's kind of like a twofold question. Multiple pizza party shows.
Yeah, so it's been it's funny. We went from finishing that first show on such a high, and we weren't sure immediately what we were going to do next, and we ran a show a couple months later. It's hard to follow up when you have all the talent in the world at your disposal. We don't have to worry about flying anybody in, and then you go to your second show and you're like, okay, you have less wrestling fans in the area, and you really have to carve out your spot. And so we learned, I think every show we've learned a ton. So we've run 4 shows in total now, and we're heading to our 5th going into Tampa. And I think every show we've learned a lot about putting together shows, structuring everything, marketing shows. It's really been cool, because I said to somebody on my team, Joey T is his stage name there, and I said to him as the first show finished, I said, okay, now we got to figure out how to get to Tampa next year on the collective. And I felt like the whole kind of first year culminated to getting to this point that we're headed to, and I'm excited that it panned out. I was Babe Ruth calling my shot. Not to compare myself to Babe Ruth, but I was just, that was where I wanted to be, and I worked sort of, and I feel like I don't know what's going to happen when Tampa ends, because I feel like I've spent so much time building that moment. Like since I would say like May of last year, that was my end game, and so it's exciting. I'm like so excited for it, and I think we've learned a lot, and I'm really excited to like show the world what we can do at this stage.
Becky Lynch, not to give more of a comparison to mainstream media or mainstream promotions, but made the statement of what happens when all your dreams come true. You make new ones, Dan. That's going to be the goal, right? Yeah. Is make yourself some new goals after this one. So you said that it was all about marketing. It was, there was some transition. What were some of the things you had to adjust? Was it catering to a certain audience? Was it knowing who your demographic was? What were some of the things that you had to plan out strategically that it was going to be successful? Because you investing as much time as you have, you don't want it to just be a lot of blood, sweat, and tears with no return.
Absolutely.
Yes.
No, you're right. I think for us, we assumed in the beginning after we did that first show that everybody would be ready to accept sort of our uniqueness. Where we come at things a little out there, and I think the second show we realized in order to get people on board to what we want to do, I think we need to communicate it a little bit better, and so I think ultimately during this first year we were finding our voice. I would say a lot of promoters that would be in their first year might go through this, where when you run a show, there's a bunch of people that would want to work with you, and it's hard to say no to certain things when they come in, and you just kind of have to learn and stay true to what your vision is. And I think I wouldn't say that we've like lost the plot at all, but I would say we definitely been just honing in on finding our vision, and that's why I think when you look at our lineup for Tampa for Birthday Bash, it really is who we are, like totally 100%. This is who Pizza Party Wrestling is.
You and I have had some chats leading up to tonight's conversation, and you talked about there being some real local talent, and kind of springboarding off of what you just said. Maybe you can talk to those that are involved that maybe aren't as known, and maybe those that how they came about and jumped on board the Pizza Party bandwagon here.
Sure. So as I mentioned before, I come from that backyard wrestling background. When there was a thought we had a couple of years ago when we were doing one of these shows, and people were doing crazy stuff that you expect to see in a backyard, and I said, this stuff really, nobody's seen some of this stuff before, and if we could be the first people to present it, that would be, it would be, I think it would help make us really unique if we were to ever do anything. And now we're here, and you have guys like Dougie Mosa, who just actually recently made his GCW debut, and guys like Brad Rush, and Tyrannosaurus Flex, Ezekiel James, Matt Vertigo. Matt Vertigo had been on the scene, but you guys that hadn't really, they'd been on the indies, but not done a ton, these are guys that I think do stuff exceptionally well and can be real players on the independent scene. So it was about, sort of endorsing them and giving them the opportunities to shine. Those are all names that I think very soon will be popping up all over the place.
And you have spoken very highly about definitely some of those names. One of the names, Oswald Project, was I think somebody we
Yes, he is. has inhumane levels of flexibility. Yeah, he is. Yeah, spawned from a petri dish in Wyoming. He is unlike anything I've ever seen. And every time I see him in and out of the ring, I am floored that this individual walks this earth.
So, in talking to some of the talent that you have mentioned, what is it about them that you feel is going to be what turns people's attention to them? Matt Vertigo and some of those guys. What was it differently, instinctively about each one of them that you feel there is something special? That is it something that can be taught, something that's just innate? Like, what is it about them?
It's funny. For all of the names I've mentioned, it's a little bit something different across the board. I could start with Matt Vertigo. I mean, this is a guy that I've known him for 5 years now, and as long as I've known him, you've watched him wrestle, and you knew he was built for it. Like his actions, everything he does he is a professional wrestler, and he's like 6 foot, 6'7" maybe, and he's in there. He's doing corkscrew dives to the outside. He's power slamming people. He can do it all. Ezekiel James just has this incredible look, and he's got a really great mind for professional wrestling. Brad Rush has one of the most outside the box ways to look at professional wrestling, and when he's got a personality, like when he walks in a room, he is the room.
Mm-hmm.
And Dougie Mosa, I feel like there's a ton of athletic guys out there that do flips and stuff, but there's something about the way he kind of comes at it a little bit differently with just slightly different. He's a little bit innovative with it, and he's not going out there and he's hitting 630s every show, but he's coming up with fun and unique ways to incorporate what I call like a holy shit style offense. I'm not sure if you've seen the clip of him doing a running Spanish fly on the apron and hitting it perfectly at our last show, Pirate. If you haven't, I'll retweet it when this comes out or reply to it with it so that people can see it. It's truly incredible.
Oh, fantastic. So definitely listeners are going to hear that Dan has a very forward-thinking approach as it comes to wrestling, and definitely today, being contemporary, you want to adjust with the times. So in saying that, I'm sure you face probably traditionalists might have some criticisms about the type of wrestling, that there's nothing wrong with it, but their outlook is encapsulated in a certain time. What do you say to that? Did I frame that properly?
You walked the line perfectly there, man. I would have said some things that were a little bit less than nice, but
but hey, you know what? If we're gonna say that we're gonna be inclusive, we're gonna try to be inclusive.
No, for sure.
But yet at the same time try to exclude them. What do you say to that mindset and those that argue it? And because in a tweet you have a certain amount of characters in which you can share what it is that you're really thinking. You have carte blanche here, my friend. So share really how Pizza Party and really more contemporary wrestling that's happening today is the way of the future, and that's how we adjust. And
sure. This may upset people. When we started Pizza Party, I didn't want to be 3 letters. I wanted to be something that when you said the name, it struck something in you, and I wanted to create something that, like, so much stuff in wrestling has been done, and a lot of wrestling moderns or patterns itself after what is the mainstream and what has been the status quo for so long. And I like seeing things like Beyond Wrestling and Black Label Pro sort of push things and GCW, of course, doing things like the Backyard Wrestling Show. These things I think fans have been clamoring for different for a long time, and I don't think fans know what I don't think you can sit there and say you don't know what different is, but there's definitely a moment where a fan has said, well, hey, wouldn't it be cool if this happened, or wouldn't it be cool if that happened? And that's kind of what we want to bring to the table, like that experimental side of professional wrestling. Like we've done, we try to just I don't want to say lower the stakes because I don't want to cheapen what we're doing, but we try to just make it a little bit more relatable while being ridiculous. Like we did a match at our last show where Oreo Speedwagon wrestled this tag team called the Atlantic City Scoundrels because the Atlantic City Scoundrels stole their Amazon packages. It was around Christmas time, so it was relevant, and it was just coming at wrestling from just a different lens and a different angle. And it's like the same thing what we're doing at Birthday Bash. We're having Faye Jackson call out Florida Man, and we're having a 4-on-4 tag team match as the final word in the debate with whether pineapple is an acceptable pizza topping or not. We're just trying to have fun with it, and not take it over the top without taking it super seriously, where it's like, hey, you trash my locker room, we're gonna have a match now, or I don't respect you and you don't respect me. Those stories have all been told, so I think it would just be cool to tell some different stories in professional wrestling, or use wrestling as a way to tell different stories.
Are you looking for the newest and hottest in the world of pro wrestling? Then check out the amazing action on Powerslam.tv, the biggest indie pro wrestling channel in the world. Get over 6,000 hours of the best events from over 150 of your favorite promotions from 20 different countries around the globe. Brands like Progress Wrestling, Evolve Wrestling, Combat Zone, Defy, PCW Ultra, PWX, Over the Top, Shine, and hundreds of others with fresh content added every day for only $5.99 per month. Get your free trial today at Powerslam.tv.
Why do you think maybe traditionalists are afraid to let go and not just have fun with it and still really want to protect it as like that special, really fragile stone that if you drop it, it shatters and you can't repair it. But, when you shatter something, it could be thousands of pieces of beauty. Just if you put it together in a mosaic, it can look fantastic. It just can look different. Why do you feel that maybe they won't let go of that?
I'm not sure, and I've never been a traditionalist, so it's hard to put myself in their shoes. I've always been looking at everything in my life from a different vantage point than everybody else.
Yeah.
I think nostalgia is such a big part of wrestling, and I think the further it veers away from what they're comfortable with, then it means it can't go back. And I don't even know if that's necessarily true. I think it could go back if people really wanted it to. Like, who's to say that 10 years from now or even 5 years from now there can't be some old Southern style promotion that abandons all the current things that are happening in wrestling. It just goes back to its roots, and it's just if they want 30-minute slow grapples, they can. That's all it is, and they can have that. And like if it's just all mat classics, then I think maybe now more than ever there's becoming I think more companies are going to pivot and do things differently where that can come back into the fold for people. With like IWTV, there's more options for people to watch wrestling now than ever. So like just something like Zone 23 is becoming one of the most popular things, and it's so far removed from that traditionalist thing, but it's amazing all at the same time. And I think it's strange to me that people wouldn't be willing to accept wrestling as this beautiful art form that can have many different ways to be presented, and to present it in the same way. I don't know how many years you can watch the same thing over and over and over and over and over again and not get bored of it. I think there's always I think wrestling has to evolve, and I think those people might get left behind as fans. I'd hate for that because I think wrestling's so awesome, but I don't know. I can't imagine why somebody wouldn't love what's going on in wrestling today.
This has been really enlightening because I never really I grew up as a traditionalist, but I grew up as a traditionalist because that was my early exposure to it. The more I dig into the rabbit hole that is independent wrestling and all these different places from all over the world, it really is quite fascinating in how things are different, and yet we're still all kind of we're still the same when it comes to one and seeing this as an art form and how you work that art form and the complexity of styles and the creativity that goes into it. It's quite fascinating.
Yeah, if I could make an analogy, I would say I view wrestling so much like I view like beer and craft beer, and that there's people that they don't want to go anything that's got like an IPA, or they don't want to go through anything that's not a traditional beer. But the people who want those things are always going to be able to seek those things out. And I think the classic bread and butter WWE style wrestling is always going to exist. But there's going to be people that want to sort of push the bounds and create some sort of weird like milk stout with I don't know, Neapolitan ice cream in it or something like that.
Right.
And so there's always going to be different flavors of wrestling evolving and popping up, because I think the coolest thing about wrestling is that you can take any other influence once in your life and apply it to wrestling. I know people that watch kung fu movies to come up with spots instead of sitting there and watching, old wrestling matches. They sit there and they're like, okay, what cool kung fu thing can I do, or anything like that. So there's, everybody brings different things to the table. So I think it'd be silly for all of us to homogenize when we can all bring our different experiences and influences into wrestling to just, continue to create something, as you said, like a mosaic that just continues to get more beautiful no matter how, you put the pieces together.
So right now we have an idea of where Pizza Party is where it was. Right now the pizza box has yet to be made as far as to after the collective. But if you could foresee, I know this is kind of hard on the spot, but I'll throw out an idea. Would collaborating with any promotions, say across the border, be something that you would explore or?
Almost definitely, yeah. I think at the moment it's so open-ended for us, and we're so open to playing the field and trying things out. I mean, the creative force that goes into this is we throw a lot of ideas at the wall. We really try to come at things from as many angles as we can. And I would say that if you talk to me on December 31st of this year about what the plan was for this year, and you talk to me now, I already think it's different. I don't think it's changed all that much, but I'm open to a lot more things, and I'm interested in trying out a lot more things because, we're not the only wrestling company out there. So the more other people do things, the more it inspires us, or, we can sit there and say, hey, they've already done it. But I'm definitely, to get back to I'm definitely open to doing things with other promotions across the country. I think, I would say that the absolute dream is to do something with DDT in Japan. But our good friends at Interspecies and we've talked about potentially doing something this year or next. Even going home to the motherland in Italy would be really cool because I know they have one or two companies over there that do pretty well. So it would be real cool to be able to bring our flavor of wrestling to there and to have them come to us. I think I'm open to work with as many different and experimental promotions as there are out there.
Are you looking for the newest and hottest in the world of pro wrestling? Then check out the amazing action on powerslam.tv, the biggest indie pro wrestling channel in the world. Get over 6,000 hours of the best events from over 150 of your favorite promotions from 20 different countries around the globe. Brands like Progress Wrestling, Evolve Wrestling, Combat Zone, Defy, PCW Ultra, PWX, Over the Top, Shine, and hundreds of others with fresh content added every day for only $5.99 per month. Get your free trial today at powerslam.tv.
We know that certain pockets, this is more as a promoter because I'm sure just as it's important for you to be creative and innovative, you also have to have your finger kind of on the pulse of the next big thing and the next big geographic area of where wrestling is coming from. So there's been lots of, clearly the UK has the discussion as to whether Brit Rest is dying or dead is one discussion. There's a pocket of wrestlers, not a pocket, but an influx of wrestlers coming from Australia and New Zealand. Where do you see people should keep an eye out in an area, per se, that maybe isn't as talked about? I mean, last year I was hearing about Chile being a country to keep an eye out on. What have you heard? What have you seen? What have you read about?
Well, I'll definitely back your point on Australia. There's so many people from Australia that are doing things that are, I really think they're the next, they're like in the middle of it. If you look at the next PWG card, it's a lot of it is a lot of Australians, and you love to see things like that. I would say that I think the next area is, I think we'll still see things, even though NXT UK is a thing and people are worried about that scene drying up. I still think there's going to be things coming out of Europe because I think WXW does such a good job, I think, of bringing people up. I think like those areas where there's established infrastructures are going to be the key to focus on still. But I don't know. I haven't seen things from I haven't seen a lot of like new stuff. I believe I saw something. I don't remember the country. I think it was Denmark on IWTV or no, it was Portugal. Sorry, way different country. And I had some of the spots and stuff and wrestlers I saw from there were incredible. So and in Spain while we're at it, because you have people like A-Kid and Carlos Romo, who are are both really good too. So it'll be cool to see what kind of other talent are there as they start to expand on that scene and get more exposure on that as things go on.
Fantastic. So we like to play a little game here on Pro Wrestling Post podcast, and we'd be wondering if you'd be interested in taking part in this.
Sure, I'll go in blind.
Okay. So the questions are pretty much thought of on the spot. So it's kind of a rapid fire. It's called Wrestling Tinder, much like regular Tinder. We're going to pose a question. If you find it attractive and you want to get to know it more, you'll swipe right and you'll explore it with your answer. If you're not, and it's not as sexy and it's not something that you want to take out, you can swipe left. Okay. This
is fun. I like this.
Okay. Well, the pressure becomes on me. I'm like, I build it up. I sure hope it delivers to that. So clearly competition is a good thing, whether you're looking at it from a media standpoint when it comes to wrestling, whether it's larger promotions, smaller promotions. Do you see there being a scenario where independent promotions come together and create their own media opportunity, network showcase of their talent, whether it's a fight network and it's a rotation of Pizza Party, Black Label Pro, whomever, GCW, just to throw out names?
Yeah, I'd swipe right on that. I think the more showcase opportunities that exist for professional wrestling, specifically independent wrestling, are great. And I think if companies like that were at the helm, I think everything would kind of stay true to what it needs to be. Not to say that television wrestling doesn't stay true to what it is, but I think when you're on the independents and you don't have big sponsor money at you, you kind of have to you have to keep them happy. When independent wrestling, you can get wild.
Super. Okay, so let's throw out something else. You're part of the collective. GCW is prominent. Thoughts, opinions on Brett Lauderdale?
I love Brett Lauderdale. I consider I talk to Brett and I reach out to him because I consider his advice to be sage. So swipe right on Brett Lauderdale.
Go for it. Share some thoughts, opinions, his contributions to wrestling.
I think he's in a world where, and this will be a weird analogy. I think of professional wrestling and independent wrestling sometimes as high school, or just for the wrestling scene in general. It's high school where you want to do something to stand out, but you don't want to stand out too much because then people will call you weird or anything like that. I think they have done such a good job of throwing up their middle fingers and saying we're going to do whatever we want, whenever we want, and it's so cool to watch how I remember I wrote a piece about them for a blog I had 2 years ago going into Spring Break 2 and how they had not yet just taken over wrestling, but it was just that card that they were putting together was what made you realize they're about to take over wrestling, and to watch them grow and do all the stuff they've done since then, and some of the names they've brought in and some of the matches they've put together, I think they're the kings of putting together matches you didn't know you needed to see.
We at Pro Wrestling Post, we do preview Game Changer Wrestling events, but it's hard to even keep up with them because they're so frequent. How does he put it all together so quickly, so organized, everything, I's are dotted, T's are crossed, and so efficiently? How does he do it? I don't think he sleeps. I think that's the trick. I don't think he sleeps. He's part vampire.
But the team, it's the team that they have there. I've been to a number of GCW shows, and the team that they have there is so strong, and it really is. It fires on all cylinders. And I went to a show at the end of December, and I was there 2 weeks later when I went to a show in Philly and a show in Asbury Park, and just clockwork. Everything just runs, and it's. I think so much about being a solid wrestling promotion is people within their organization knowing what everybody's strong suits is, and everybody working together to achieve a common goal. And I think GCW, they're all soldiers, and I think they work their asses off, and they deserve to be running. I think they've run like almost every week since in the new year. So it's awesome. It's awesome that there's an independent company out there that Beyond did it last year, but there's awesome that GCW is traveling the world and doing it. Yep. And they've LA, Texas, Japan. They're going to Detroit in a few weeks. So yeah, they're really and I don't know for sure, but I feel like they're selling everything out. So they're killing it. They're doing an awesome job.
Fantastic. So thanks, Dan. Before we do let you go, was there anything you wanted to share, promote, Yes, we definitely have Pizza Party Wrestling coming up as part of the collective this WrestleMania week. Maybe you can share again when the date for the event is and some of the featured matches.
Yeah. It's if you're going to be in Tampa or you're going to be watching at home, you should definitely watch Pizza Party Wrestling's Birthday Bash on April 3rd at 3 p.m. in the ballroom in the Cuban Club. We've got matches like Alex Zane versus Super Crazy. We've got Tony Deppen versus Eric Stevens. As I said before, we have a 4-on-4 where Cabana Man Dan's leading a team of pineapple enthusiasts against Dan the Dad, some anti-pineapple people. Daniel Makabe versus Fred Yehai 2 is on deck, and probably the most obscure match you'll see all weekend is the team of Demorest and Oswald Project versus Violence is Forever. I think that Styles Clash is going to be a lot of fun for people who don't know Demorest and Oswald, and I think it'll be a good intro to the rest of the world for them to see them do that against one of the best tag teams going.
Fantastic. On behalf of Dan of Pizza Party Wrestling, this is Mark Madison saying thank you for listening to the Pro Wrestling Post podcast.
Thank you so much for listening to the Pro Wrestling Post podcast with your host, Mark Madison. Once again, please visit ProWrestlingPost.com for interviews, blogs, and upcoming events in your area. And be sure to download the podcast on iTunes, Stitcher, Google Play, Anchor, or whatever podcast app you prefer.